I've also included an option to have a shore. Let's say here, let's say I want to have water at the bottom in here. I can just enable this global water blend inside of the shore tab. I've actually included an option in here, see if I can find it, to use my mid-layer material as shore. So, I think my dirt, it has stones in it and stuff. Like, I would actually really like to use that as my shore and then save a bunch of extra textures. Because, it's like these landscapes, there's so many layers and materials and textures. It's crazy. It's easy to really make them unusable in a game quite quickly. So let's check that, make it my dirt material. As soon as I do that, all of these textures are going to disappear, right? Because I'm not using them anymore. So once the shaders recompile, you'll see that it's actually creating a dirt shore for me. You can see we're having issues with our shore right away. The way it works is you have a shore that has a specific height value in the world, and you have to choose what you want your height to be. So in this case, I want it to be a lot lower. So let's just say like minus 10,000, minus 30,000, no, minus 25,000, maybe even less than that, minus 27,000. Maybe something like that. That's okay. We can have like a little lake where all of the flow maps are going towards. So that should be okay. Okay, so it kind of looks like crap right now, but there's a few settings that we can tweak on it to make it look better. What the shore does is it just gets overlaid over top of everything. It gets overlaid over top of World Machine. It gets overlaid over top of top layer, just so that it's always at the very top. So here, I'm just gonna show a color tint. Just gonna see if I can tweak a few values just to see what's going on over here. Okay, so I just color tinted my my waterline. I've included a few, like an actual water plane in the world that you guys can use however you want. Let's see, water plane. Just zoom out so I can see what's going on with it. There it is. So I'm just gonna bring that over here, and I'm gonna dip it down so that it matches. What we want to do is match it to the actual water line. So if I scroll this down, a little bit finicky, you have to be quite precise to make it work properly. Maybe something like that. And then if I go back into my shader, I can actually change the size of my shore. So the shore is everything above the water. So let's say 300. Whoops. Yeah. It's like you can make the shore bigger or wider. You can also blur the edge of the mask here. So say 50, 500, and you'll have like a smoother kind of gradation into the grass. But, I don't really like that much. I don't like it like super hard, but, kind of want like a little bit of a blur. I hate having those like lines, like where it goes rock to dirt, it's kind of always like a little bit of a blend between the two, which looks a little bit nicer. I can also tweak the shore roughness. So let's just go to our roughness. I've included this kind of little line in the roughness. That's a little bit weird. I've included this little line in the roughness where, like, you know how, you can't see it right now, but you know how, like, right above the water on the shore, it's usually a little bit wet, where, like, the water's kind of lapped up on the surface a little bit? I'm just going to see if I can get that in here. Yeah, so I changed the shore wetness width right here. And it just adds this kind of nice line of wetness right above the water. Kind of cool. Yeah, so you can change all those numbers, do whatever you want. You can even change the roughness of the shore. Like if you want it to be less rough, more rough, I don't know. I usually just leave that at default. I think it's set at like 0.1 or 0.2, something like that. It just gives that nice kind of muddy feel, you know. Let's talk about the grass variation. I have this top layer 02. And what that is it's an optional extra material that you can put on the grass. So wherever the grass is showing this extra material, top layer 02, it will show up as well, depending on a mask, right? It's not even enabled right now, but you're still actually kind of seeing it, because it's, you see where the flowers and stuff are? That's actually using a mask that I grabbed from the kite demo. And I just incorporated it in my splat map texture. So if you guys go to the flow map color overlays section, you can just open up your splat map texture. And the mask that I'm actually using it's in the red channel. So it's this like kind of macro variation. And so what this is doing is wherever it's white in the texture, it's showing the normal grass. But wherever it's black, it's showing the flowers. So what we're doing is we're actually taking this and like multiplying the grass mask, like wherever the grass is, this will get overlaid over top of it. So, and then it'll switch between normal grass and flowered grass based off of this texture. And this texture is being UV'd across the entire terrain. That's specifically for the meshes that's happening right now, because we haven't actually enabled a top layer 02. Yeah, so enable top layer 02, which, you know, it's going to be more textures and makes your shader more expensive, but it looks nice. So if you want, you can add it. Let's check this. Now that I've enabled top layer 2 with this little checkbox here, it's opened up all these different options over here. So we can add new textures in. We could have a second grass texture. If, let's say you wanted a flower texture to spawn right here, then you could easily just make a flower texture exactly the way that they did in the kite demo and have that be the one that's underneath the flowers, right? Also, for the grass layer 02, there's a couple settings inside of this flow map color overlays section. So once you enable that, you have the option of enabling like a flow map color overlay. So it works the same way. You can tint the color and it'll just say top layer 02 color and, you know, change it that way. So you know how I said earlier that it's using this texture to decide where the grass, the flowers go and where the material underneath the flowers will go? In here, in the flow map color overlays, you have a few settings to change that. Right here, channel to use for top layer macro variation. You would just enable that and you can choose whichever channel. Like right now it's using the red channel in this, but let's say you wanted to use the flow map, or you know, you wanted it to spawn somewhere else, you could easily just do that. I don't really think we need to for now. There's a few settings. You can invert it, or you can invert the flow map texture so that the flow map shows in the opposite. You can invert the top layer macro mask, that thing I was just talking about, so that the grass shows on the other side. You can change the contrast on it. There's a bunch of stuff you can do. Like, let's just, for instance, change the contrast to 10. See, it's just white right now, but you could put snow there, and then you could have no grass spawn here. But yeah, the more contrast you have, the better it's gonna be. Like you can see, it's just spawning the grass with the flowers here. I'm gonna show you guys about like the procedural meshes in a bit. Like for now, I don't actually feel like we need this, so I'm actually just going to disable it. So there's this path material over here. Yeah, let's just set it up. I'll show you guys. It's just a paint layer that you can paint. So let's find leaf path. It's also a kite map texture. Path, normal, channel mask, RAOH, that's good. I'd probably just leave the values by default. It's a 2048 texture, so just like all the other ones. So let's change the UVs to the exact same as everything else, 0.1. So the path UV tiling, 0.1. And it's not going to show up unless you manually paint it, right? I'm just going to go into my modes and my landscape tab, and if I scroll down here, you can see all of my paint layers don't have any layer info in them. So this is like super easy, guys. Like all you really have to do to add them is, and the base example map that I give you guys, this is already set up, but every new material that you make and every new landscape that you do, you're going to have to make these again. So I would always just create weighted. So wherever, say like leaf path, let's just say like weight blended, leaf path, save it wherever your shared assets folder is. Okay. And like while we're here, let's make the other ones weight blended, shore, base layer, weight blended. One more thing while we're on these paint layers, make sure that when you put the mesh removal weight layer in here, make sure that it's no weight blend that you choose. That's the only one that you want to do this with. It won't work properly unless it's no weight blend. The way that these layers are working is the only one that you're actually seeing right now is auto material. Right? Because it's being procedurally textured by the auto material, and that's the only layer that we actually want to see right now. But if you wanted to manually paint stuff, you could. You would just have to add those layer infos in here with weight blended. As long as the specific layer, say top layer 01, as long as that has textures in it, you're good. It's like, say like top layer 02 right now. It has no textures, so I'm pretty sure this is actually just going to show top layer 01. Like it's literally just using the textures of top layer 01. So like unless you have it enabled, it's useless. So I just wouldn't use it. And leaf path. Did we put textures in that? Let's take a look. Yeah, we did. I don't know why it's kind of weird right there. Maybe it's the texture pool. Let's just save it, see if it fixes. Yeah, there you go. Now that I have my leaf path layer info set up, I can actually just paint that. I'm just going to show you guys how to do it. Say like tool strength 1, let's make this like 500, brush fall off, maybe like 0.7. And then you'll see I paint, and every new landscape component, a landscape component is this big square right here. Every landscape component that I paint on, it's going to have to recompile because the landscape components, they optimize themselves based off the materials that you paint onto them. So in this one, I just added one, so it has to compile all the shaders here. So it'll take a second. But, once you've added all your landscape paint layers onto your components, like wherever you're going to be painting, it's like it just paints right away. You don't have to wait. So one thing you'll see is wherever I paint this, it removes the grass. So it's quite useful. No, kind of nice. So you can create little paths. You could sculpt the path a little bit. Let's just try that right now. So 0.1, say like 300. You know, maybe add like maybe add like a little bow in the path, maybe like 500. Try like something like this. You know, so it goes down wherever the grass isn't. Kind of looks a little bit better. I think like the height map could be exaggerated on that path a bit. Let's just pull that up. Path. Scroll through path height. Let's open that and say like 1.5 maybe. There you go. So that's a bit better. Nice. And you can see this shore is I think it's a bit too intense for me. See, like that's kind of the thing about this landscape stuff is, you know, you'll think something looks good and then you see it from far away and you're like, oh crap, I have to change that. So let's just go to our shore and let's lower the size of it, maybe like 150, you know, something like that. And let's actually up our blur a little bit. You know, so maybe it'll like thin out the grass a little bit before it gets there and kind of remove that like line. I hate that line. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that should be decent. I have one issue right now that's really kind of bothering me is my grass is a different texture or a different color than my actual grass right here. So what I'm actually going to do is go into buffer visualization base color and see how it's like the grass is like a lot darker. I don't know if that's the flow map that's doing that. Yeah, it's the flow map I can see right now. I'm actually just going to darken both my top layer albedo and my flow map. Actually, let's go back to my base color. See, like it's not that bad anymore. I think that's pretty good. Okay, yeah, I think that's a bit better. You know, you don't get this like white versus green. It makes me feel better about it. And let's take a look at the macro. It's pretty good. Feels like grass, or hillside, mountain, whatever it is. In our paint section right here, I've also included this option to remove meshes. Yeah, you can just paint them out. Super easy. Just like all the other paint layers, it might take a second for the shader to compile, but yeah, you can just paint out meshes wherever you want. You know, if you have a gameplay space and you want to do some, say, custom meshes here through the foliage painting tool, then, you know, that's an option. Sometimes you're going to get like weird kind of shapes with your world machine height map, you know, like this. There's a few different solutions for this. You could just smooth the terrain right here, which, you know, it's kind of like from far away, it's going to look shittier and it's going to look a little bit more kind of marshmallow shaped. But like one thing you guys kind of have to keep in mind is that like the landscape, it's not a be all end all tool that does absolutely everything. Like it doesn't work like that. Like you're still going to need to use meshes and, you know, big rock meshes to cover up some of this stuff. But it's just good for getting like a really solid base in there before you populate everything with assets. One issue that I just noticed is my landscape's kind of at a really weird location over here. like 201,000. I don't know how that happened, but I really don't like it. So I'm just going to set it to 0. Like I always try to keep this stuff at 0 so that the shaders work properly. Okay, see that's better. I was like, because there was something weird with the grass. It's bothering me. So if now you can tell, because this is the landscape's at 0, what's happening. I've included this little feature that actually changes the color of the procedurally generated grass meshes based off of the flow map. See that? It's like right here. See, like here, you get this kind of more orangey tint. It matches the tint of the grass over here, because I've already made the shader for it, right? But I'm gonna go over the grass stuff in a bit.
Now I thought would be a pretty good time for us to talk about our landscape grass types. It's just a type of file that plugs into our material and tells our material what meshes to spawn on which layers. So if you just navigate to landscape grass types folder, you have all of these different files in here, and each one has a different name. You know, this is base. So in our case, base would be our rock. So any meshes inside of here that we have will go onto our rock. But we're not really spawning any meshes on our rocks right now, so this is blank. But if you wanted to, you could just add a new mesh to spawn in here, and you know the settings are quite easy. You just plug whatever static mesh you want in. You can change the density of it. You can change when they start to cull, when they end cull, like when they disappear off the screen. So for optimization, you can choose which LODs they start at. You can change the scaling so that you know it's not uniform, it's free. You can change the size jitter, so you could say like 0.5 to 1, 0.5 to 1, 1 to 2 if you want it to go bigger, and every instance of the mesh will be slightly different depending on the numbers that you put into these scales, into these scale swatches. Random rotation, align to surface, so align to surface will make it so that your mesh actually aligns to the normal of your face that it's spawning on your terrain. So it'll basically angle with your terrain. This one, use landscape light map, is quite useful, especially for grass, because what it does is it makes it so that when I actually build lighting, these meshes, my grass meshes, they won't actually get a unique light map on them. They'll actually take the light map from the landscape underneath, the color of the light map, and then it gets multiplied over top of your specific instance. So it actually just creates this really nice blend between the grass and the landscape itself. Because, you know, doing grass is quite difficult sometimes. You can see right here, it's lit pretty well, and you know, you don't have like an obvious seam between the actual terrain and the mesh. Very, very useful. And I usually turn off this receives decals thing, because I don't know, why would I want it to receive decals? So we have our base, that's our rock, mid layer, which is our dirt. We have our path, so anything that we put inside of here will spawn on our actual path when we paint it. Our shore, if we go over to our shore right now, so you can see that it's spawning these meshes, right? It's spawning the grass mesh, the bush mesh. You could put rock, you could put whatever you want. But let's open that up. Open up these little tabs, and you can actually see what's going on in here. See, my grass it's quite low density, so it's barely spawning. The size is jittered, and the scaling is free, so they might scale a little bit wider or a little bit taller, depending on each instance that spawned. So stream. So we haven't talked much about stream. It's just a stream you can paint. Top layer 01 and top layer 02. So if we actually go over to our grass, and let's find this. So see how we have some flowers spawning? What's happening there is that's actually top layer 02, and top layer 01 is just our normal grass. So let's open up 02 just so we can see. And you can see it has the flowers, they're kind of low density, they have all the different settings that we just talked about. And yeah, it's quite easy. You just swap your mesh and you're good. But what this is doing is it's actually using our mask. So let's see if I can bring this back up. Search for flow map color overlays. So this is actually using what we talked about earlier, that grass or top layer macro variation. And it's spawning in either the white or black of this mask on our grass, which is kind of cool. So you can just add flowers that spawn in at random locations, or not random, but wherever you specify depending on the mask. Right now, this is kind of just a random detail mask, but you could make it more directed. You could change it to the flow map if you really wanted to. Yeah, in our shader, if we actually said channel to use for top layer macro variation, if I click that, I could change the channel that it's using to spawn the grass meshes from our splat mask texture. If I changed it to flow map, then all of the flowers would actually be spawning in the flow map. Let's also talk about the shader for our foliage, which if we go in here, master materials, there's a master foliage shader. This is, don't pay attention to all of these. I'm going to clean all this up, so it's going to be there's going to be a lot less stuff in there when I give it to you. But actually, I think an easier way to do this is for me to just show you guys the grass that's already there. So yeah, if I go to my meshes folder, grass, there's a little instance here. Let's just open that up. And I'm just going to go over some of the different features of the material. So you have like kind of all of your base textures. You can just put them in there. Super easy. You can add like some slight color variation to it. You can change your normal intensity, roughness intensity, specular value. Your specular value just controls the highlights, like basically how shiny the highlights are going to be, which I like to lower them a bit because they become too intense. Yeah, you can change like the color tint. You can change the tint of your subsurface scattering. So subsurface scattering is, you can see our light is coming from that direction, and it basically simulates light passing through your foliage and illuminating the other side, kind of like when you look at a leaf underneath a tree and you can see the light passing through it. Yeah, you can play with those values. So you have a bunch of different options to customize this stuff. You can use your albedo alpha channel as your opacity mask, which is usually pretty standard in the game industry. You can invert your albedo roughness. That's if you're using your albedo as roughness. What this does is it's actually taking my albedo texture, which is this, and it's desaturating it, and then using that as your roughness channel. But you can invert it, and then you can change the roughness intensity here. You also have the option of using your albedo as your subsurface texture, but I'm not doing that because I already have a subsurface texture right here. And you can use a channel mask texture, so that's what we talked about earlier. You would have your roughness in R, your opacity in green, and your AO in blue. So you could go in there and use that however you want. Yeah, so this landscape diffuse color variation option it's blending the color of your grass with the color of your landscape. So if I go up here and go to landscape foliage color, you can see I've basically taken my albedo from World Machine and overlaid that over top of the color of my grass. That's great for giving this variation where my flow maps are. Yeah, it's just a nice option to add, like, you know, those kind of lines that go through your grass wherever water's kind of interacted with the foliage or the landscape. You can see it here, it's kind of subtle, but and you can change the color intensity of it. Change it to 0. It switches back just to the default foliage color that we already have down here or in our albedo. But if I change that to 4, it just subtly kind of blends in the color of the world machine texture onto your grass. So super, super useful. You also, down here, you have this option of using vertex color as AO. So let's say you wanted to add some AO onto like the base of your grass mesh, like down at the bottom. You could easily do that with, like, you know, a 3D program. You could say in 3D Studio Max, do a gradient across it so that the base is a little bit darker. But you would have to make sure that it's colored green in 3D Studio Max, or else it won't work. And you also have the option of painting vert color to remove movement on your meshes. So if I open this guy, you can see at the base, the bottom of my mesh, it's not actually moving like the top of them is. That just makes it seem a bit more grounded and removes kind of some of the crappy waviness that goes with some of the procedural wind movement on the meshes. So yeah, you would have to go into a 3D program of your choosing and then use the red channel for that one. Sure, you could go look up a tutorial on adding vertex color to a mesh in 3D Studio Max or Maya. Quite straightforward. In my landscape foliage color settings right here, you can see kind of some of these weird numbers here. What those are doing is they're actually telling our world machine texture how to be mapped across all of our procedural meshes in the world. We need to match these numbers up to the size of our landscape. Yeah, okay, so if I go up here, and I'm just going to look at some of the numbers of our landscape, just select it, and you can see location is 0, 0, Z is 100. I don't think that actually matters though for this. But the scale is 100, 100, 400. The only values that these numbers actually apply to are X and Y. So it would be X and Y. So here you'd want to start by setting the size of your landscape. So like your, whatever resolution your world machine height map was. So in our case, it's 4033. You can change it to whatever you want. And then your scale, if I have my landscape selected and go down and look at my scale, it's at 100 and 100. So I just want it at 100, basically. The Z doesn't matter because that's only vertical. This is just mapping it in X and Y. And then here, I have landscape XY location in the world. So X is red and Y is green. Let's say I enable that. And let's say my location is like 500,000 on X and 500,000 on Y. I would just change R to 500,000 and G to 500,000. So R is X and G is Y. You can see right here. So, but like that's part of the reason why I wanted our landscape to be at 0, 0, 0, because everything, like you won't have to change any of these values if everything's at 0, 0, 0 and your scale is at 100. So I also have this distance fade option right here. What that does is it helps with the line on our grass getting culled out. So here, just to show you guys, if I go here, I can check this option I can check this option or uncheck it depending on what you want. If you're trying to optimize, you might want to get rid of it. So here, this just creates a fade from the number specified so that your grass just slowly kind of fades out instead of just being like a harsh line when it culls out. So if I change this number, distance until fade. So what you want to do is you want to match this to the distance that your grass is actually getting culled out of. So if I open up my landscape layer, my top layer, O1, you can see, open this, my landscape grass culls out at 8,000 units. So I kind of want to match my opacity fade to that. But, you know, you kind of have to give or take depending on the results. And here, just to show you guys what it looks like without it, I'm just going to turn it off. So see this line right here? It's quite apparent. You know, it's not that bad when you're like walking around, and in most games, people just don't notice it. It's kind of just one of those extra kind of icing on the cake features. So let's just turn it back on. You can see when I turn it back on and off, see the line right here? It just kind of slowly fades it out a little bit. So if I change this to, let's just say 5, just kind of got to fiddle with the number a bit. The lower the number, the less opaque the alpha on the meshes is going to be. So I usually leave it around like 1. Turn it off and on again just to show you. But, you know, it just breaks that line.
Thanks a lot for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial, and if you haven't already, don't forget to like and subscribe, as well as hit the notification bell so that you see every time I put out a new video. Cheers!